What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and every year we have breakout wide receivers coming out of nowhere and dominating in fantasy. If you draft one of these guys on your team, you're going to be in a much better spot than if you didn't. We saw Jamar Chase have a massive breakout in his first year. Deebo Samuel crushed in his third year. Chris Godwin and Calvin Ridley were great in their third years. Last year we had Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jalen Waddle. And this year we're going to break down the 9 wide receivers that you must draft before they break out in 2023. So with all that being said, make sure you get down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen.
Now I will say, we low-key crushed this last year. This is the timestamps from this same video, but from last year. I mean, we called Waddle and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Those were the two biggest year 2 wide receiver breakouts last year that weren't super obvious. And then you also had Jerry Jeudy and Ayuk, who had top 24 seasons. Garrett Wilson was on this list. Elijah Moore, Kadarius Toney, not so great, but you're not going to bat 1,000 on these videos. So today, when we talk about breakout wide receivers and what fits our criteria, this is a screenshot from a really great article by Ryan Heath. I think that, honestly, we talk about the best articles in fantasy football every single year. Pat Crane's legendary upside running back article is one of the best. I truly do think Ryan Heath, I'll try and link it down below, but he has an article on fantasy points going through age curves and how it affects every single position in fantasy football. And he found, this is something that we already knew, but he put it into numbers that breakouts are coming for wide receivers, a breakout being their first time finishing as a top 12 wide receiver, taking place in their first 4 years, with a big emphasis on years 2 and 3 here. So the criteria for today's video is we're going to be finding wide receivers in their first 4 seasons without top 12 finishes that I think have upside to finish in the top 12 or at least crush their ADP. So let's not waste any time. Let's get into Christian Watson here as our first wide receiver. He's going off the board at the 404 as the wide receiver 21 on Underdog, as he is my 403 as my wide receiver 21. Now, I will say, in your home league, he's not going to be going early 4th. He's going to be more of a 5th, 6th round guy. So make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. They have the best ball platform in the game. Best ball means you can draft your team. There's no setting your lineup, no trades, no waiver wire. You draft your team and that's it. So it's a perfect way to get ready for your draft where the ADP is as sharp as ever. There's real money on the line. Everyone's 18 plus on the platform. So you can hop in there, get some practice, get into some $3, $5 drafts, and then see, Christian Watson's always gone in the 4th round. And then you get into your home league and you see Christian Watson's there in the 5th or 6th round. And you absolutely sprint to the podium to draft them. So make sure you check that out. Promo code RON will get you a deposit match up to $100. I have a link in the description and the comment section down below that will hook you up with that promo. Now, when we talk about Christian Watson, he is coming off a crazy year 1. We're on a per-round basis. He was an absolute monster. This is a tweet from Scott Barrett. When we look at wide receiver seasons by yards per out run since 2010, with a minimum of 200 routes run, Christian Watson has the 7th highest yards per out run on this list. Now, you also have Chris Olave here. I will say Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave would have made this list, but they felt too obvious. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper than Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. So we're talking about Christian Watson, and his yards per out run was better than Garrett Wilson, better than Drake London last year, better than every rookie wide receiver last year besides Olave, and the 7th best since 2010. It's a pretty crazy list that he's on here. And he was struggling with injuries last year, but in the games that he played, Christian Watson, he was the wide receiver 8 in points per game last year with 18.6 points per game in the games where he played over 60% of the snaps, which is crazy. Now, we're not expecting him to be a top 12 wide receiver this year, which is why we have him ranked as wide receiver 21. But it feels like back-end wide receiver 2 is kind of his floor, and he has all the upside in the world on a per-route basis last year. He was wide receiver 12 in targets per out run, wide receiver 13 in yards per out run among all wide receivers in the NFL. So doing that as a rookie is really, really impressive. Now, the downside here is the situation. He goes from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, which is pretty brutal here, but there's at least upside, right? Where Jordan Love's an unknown. It's not like this is Taylor Heineke or Jacoby Brissett, where we know who they are. It's going to be bad quarterback play. There's at least upside that Jordan Love is good at football. And even if he's not good at football, Matt LaFleur has been a pretty decent offensive coordinator or play caller in his time in the NFL. And there's a clear lack of competition on the Packers, where Christian Watson, he's going to be dominating the targets, where Mike Clay has projections here. Mike Clay is ESPN's projection guy. He's super conservative, which means a guy like Christian Watson, he's usually going to be lower on than consensus, but he has Christian Watson as his wide receiver 19, pacing for like just about 1,000 yards in 17 games. He has some carries mixed in there, but he's the only wide receiver here over even like 85 targets. The only receiver or player on this team with over 85 targets. Like, he is the clear number one option. He's going to dominate targets on this team. And despite very average stats from Jordan Love in these projections, right? 20 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, like 3,500 passing yards. That's really not great. Christian Watson still finishes as a top 20 wide receiver. So again, low-end wide receiver 2 feels like his floor with massive spike weeks mixed in. And then also, if he just goes nuclear and goes crazy, he could be a guy sort of like Amon-Ra and Jalen Waddle last year. Moving on, our second breakout candidate is Drake London. He's going on Underdog at the 409 as the wide receiver 23. He is my 402 as the wide receiver 20. So I am about 7 spots higher than consensus and like 3 wide receiver spots higher than consensus. And it's a similar story here. When we talk about your 2 wide receivers and we get past the first few rounds, I want to bet on talent over situation. And Drake London was a guy last year who was 15th among all wide receivers in yards per route run, which is really good. He was 4th in targets per route run. He was, on a per route basis, he was commanding like 27% target share, which is insane. That was behind just Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Cooper Kupp. Those are, I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Cooper Kupp are slot, low ADOT guys that just suck up targets. Tyreek Hill was just a monster last year. Drake London doing that as an X-wide receiver rookie on the perimeter in contested catch situations is pretty insane to command that kind of volume. So this is a guy who's a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, commands volume at a high level, elite prospect. I also love as well a guy who's a contested catch guy, kind of has some Mike Evans to his game. He's a little bit more athletic than that. Well, I guess early Mike Evans was very athletic, but Drake London was also like a 4-star recruit USC basketball player his first year at USC. So he's just like this overall jump ball, contested catch specialist on top of being a really good wide receiver who gets open, commands volume as well. And his year 2 comps in my database, when it takes into account his prospect profile, his year 1 PFF receiving grade, his year 1 points per game, yards per run, targets per run, his comps are all elite, right? Again, he came out as an elite prospect in my database, which have a 91% chance of hitting top 24 seasons in their NFL careers. This entire comps list, all of them have hit top 24 seasons at least twice in their careers. All but just Brandon Ayuk have hit top 12 seasons. We don't know that's going to happen this year for Drake London, but we saw with that Ryan Heath chart that most of these first top 12 seasons happen in your second or third year. So why not in year 2 for Drake London as somebody that is really, really talented, really good. He has the highest targets per run on this list of a list of guys with Mike Evans, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Percy Harvin, Brandon Ayuk. Like, it's a really good list to be a part of. He has the second highest PFF receiving grade on this list. Now, he does have the lowest point per game on this list, and that's because the offense is pretty brutal. And it was awful last year, but it is baked into his price, and that's why I like drafting Drake London, because, again, we talked about this in our wide receiver rankings video, but if Drake London was on the Jets or he was on the Saints, he'd be a 1-2 turn pick or, at worst, a middle second pick in redraft. And we're now getting him in the 4th, and in home leagues, you can get him in like the 5th. So Drake London's a guy I want to be targeting. And I think that this offense is going to take a step forward where when we look at the off-target rates last year, Marcus Mariota was awful. Kyle Pitts had the highest off-target rate in 2022 at 29% of his targets being off-target. Drake London not far behind at 19%. Mariota was awful. Now, Desmond Ridder is similar to Jordan Love, where he's a question mark at quarterback, which is good, right? There's at least upside that he may be good. And it seems like at this point, anything instead of Mariota is at least a slight upgrade. So the efficiency should get better here, and they should pass more. I know that they added Bijan Robinson, and you'd think that they would want to rush more, but last year they had 24.4 pass attempts per game, which was the 5th lowest since 2000, which is insane considering that we're in the modern era of passing football right now. That was the 5th lowest since 2000, and historically that bounces back. I compiled, this was like a couple months ago we did this study, but offenses with less than 27 pass attempts per game since 2000, it's happened 19 times. All 19 saw an increase in pass attempts the following year, which is an 18.7% increase on average across the board. And if you apply an 18.7% increase to Atlanta, they would be at 29 pass attempts per game, which would have been 28th last year. So if they can go from like historical outlier just to like bottom 10, that's a huge win. And now we also have 9 of these 19 teams. They went to 30-plus pass attempts per game the following year. So there's even upside there. Now, of course, I imagine it'll still be bottom 10, but that 29 per game number that, again, the average increase of all these offenses has been 18.7% from the historically low year to the next one. If you apply that to Atlanta, it actually matches up with what they did without Mariota, where in games with Mariota, they had a 23 pass attempts per game. With Desmond Ridder, they had 29 pass attempts per game. 29 pass attempts per game would be an extra 5 every game for them compared to what they had last year, which is a big improvement, especially if Ridder can be any more accurate than what Mariota was last year. So in the 4th round, I think there's some reason to believe that this offense can take a step forward, see a little bit more volume, and the talent is just so good that I think you just have to take a swing as a wide receiver 2 option here in Drake London. After that, we have Jahan Dotson, who I wasn't expecting to be high on this year. Now, I will say, sadly, he's gotten steamed up so much because of the Terry McLaurin injury that I haven't been able to get him as much, but I have him on over 10% of my underdog teams, which on underdog you should have like 8.3% of a player is about average. So I'm higher than consensus, or I have more than really I should on underdog. And then I have him on like 20% of my redraft managed leagues right now. We've been doing these high stakes ones. We were scooping them up all the time, like the 7th, 8th. Now we're right where the market is. Where we were a little bit higher than consensus before. Now I have him as my 606 as my wide receiver 33. He goes on underdog as the 605 as the wide receiver 33, but I imagine he probably goes like 7th round in your home leagues. Now, when we talk about Jahan Dotson, his yards per out run, targets per out run numbers aren't top 15 like they are with Christian Watson and Drake London. He finished outside the top 50 in targets per out run and yards per out run last year, but there are reasons to buy in, and friend of the channel, Jacob Sanderson, had a really good point on this earlier in the offseason where he said, this is Jahan Dotson. His data in his last 5 games was 20% target per out run, which is solid, 2.18 yards per out run, which is really good, 81.6 receiving grade, really good. Anything over 80 is amazing. 14.4 points per game. That's really good. He said if it was sustained over a full year, it wasn't. Don't pretend it was. He should be ranked at the bottom of the elite tier of the 2022 wide receiver class. He said, my issue with Pickens and Dotson's full season profiles is it is hard to project the necessary target share growth to be an elite fantasy option from their year 1 because they were already full-time starters. They have less room to grow from simply gaining routes like Burks and Watson. However, if you want to tell yourself a story, here's Dotson. His day 1 full-time role hurts a season-long per route profile because he wasn't scaling up as he grew in skill. His injury limited the amount of healthy routes he could provide to offset his early season data. So what he's trying to say is, we're going to touch on this in a second when we get into our rookie wide receiver breakouts in this video, but rookie wide receivers get better as they go on, right? Like if you remember like Amon-Ra St. Brown or Christian Watson, through the first like 6, 7, 8 weeks, they weren't great, but from weeks 10 on, they were amazing. So the issue with Jahan Dotson is that those guys, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, wasn't a full-time wide receiver until probably like week 8, week 9. Jahan Dotson from day 1 was starting in 2 wide receiver sets. So you're going to put a lot of bad tape on the field early on as you're learning the position and you get efficient on the back end, and then he gets hurt, so it limited the amount of games he could really put in a yards per out run sample on the back end of the season. So I do somewhat buy into the fact that down the stretch he was amazing, and his season-long yards per out run and targets per out run, again, outside of the top 50, don't tell the whole story. Now, when we look a little bit deeper, Jahan Dotson popped in reception perception, which is another positive indicator for him. 87th percentile versus press, green across the board besides the flat route. 87th percentile versus press for a guy who is 183 pounds and like smaller. That's really impressive. Now, Matt Harmon said this about him. He said, at worst, Dotson looks like a rock-solid number 2 receiver for years to come, but he checks so many boxes that we want out of legit number 1 receivers. He separates all over the field, wins in the vertical game, is a strong technician, and wins contested catches. Washington has a potentially excellent trio of receivers in Dotson, McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel. He said people were stunned when this guy was a 16th overall pick, which was me. I'll be honest. I was stunned that he was a 16th overall pick. They shouldn't have been. They'll be stunned when they see how strong he performed on film via reception perception. You shouldn't be. He's this good of a player. Dotson deserves more respect, period. So that is a glowing review from Matt Harmon, who's a specialist when it comes to wide receivers. And so far in the preseason, he's been absolutely dominating. He has a 25% target share in 44 Sam Howell dropbacks, blowing the field out of the water. So he kind of reminds me of like early career Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson had like a little mini breakout in year 2 where he was the wide receiver 22 in points per game. Could 100% see Jahan Dotson doing something similar where he gets drafted as like a wide receiver 3 and he finishes like a top 24 guy. Deontay Johnson had his biggest breakout in year 3 as like wide receiver 8 in points per game. I think that's like the tippy top of Jahan Dotson's ceiling, but I think wide receiver 2 is actually firmly in the range of outcomes for Jahan Dotson. Now moving on, we are going to go to the rookie wide receivers here. Now, underdog's a little bit crazy with Jaxon Smith-Njigba. As of right now, he's like the, I think 69 there. It's going to be like the 609 as like the wide receiver 36, which is pretty insane. He's my 708 as my wide receiver 39, and that's going to be ahead of consensus for your home leagues. Now, I debated leaving JSN out of this list because of the injury, right? He gets a wrist injury and gets surgery on the wrist, but he's an absolute trooper, man. For a guy who, like, I don't think of how to word this, but he kind of bowed out on Ohio State's season in his final year, where he was dealing with an injury and he only played like 2 games, and it seems like he was kind of more interested in preserving his draft stock. But I mean, he's out here with like you can't see it in this picture, but he has like a legit like brace cast around his wrist, and he's out there running routes and catching passes, which is really impressive. Now, Dr. Jesse Morris says here, it's impressive he's already on the field. While we don't have details of which bone was fractured, I think there is an outside shot he plays in week 1, better chance in week 2. Since it's his wrist, will take some time for him to get reacclimated post-brace. They have a week 5 bye, so he may not be 100% until week 6. And if he's not 100% until after the week 5 bye, that's not a massive deal to me, because I want to make it clear, when we're drafting rookie wide receivers, it's usually going to be later on, right? These are guys that you don't need to start right away. Like if you draft JSN in the 8th round, if you use the Ron Stewart rankings, which by the way, Patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I have my top 200 out right now. They're updated for the Jonathan Taylor stuff, the JSN injury, the Judy injury, the McLaurin injury, all of that good stuff. Top 200 PPR and half PPR rankings are on there. Patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can find the link in the description, comment section down below. It's a cheat sheet that you can check off as you go in your draft. I use it in all of my high stakes subscriber leagues, home league drafts, all of that. I have my target rounds for every single player, and I have them all tiered as well. It is perfect to go out there and crush your home league. But if you're using the Ron Stewart rankings, you're likely drafting JSN to be one of your, like, you know, through the flex and then plus 1 or 2. He's usually going to be your plus 1 or 2 through 10 rounds. So you can afford to have him on your bench if you filled the wide receivers through your flex, and you can wait for JSN to come on during the back half of the year. Because the reason that we're drafting rookies is for their latter half production. Again, we talked about Amon-Ra St. Brown, Christian Watson. You can look at Ayuk. You can look at A.J. Brown's rookie year. You can look at a lot of rookie years that kind of look like this. But Jack Miller did a great study. He's a established the run guy. I think formerly Rotoviz, but I'm not sure. But he did a study a couple years ago where he looked at rookie wide receiver production versus veteran wide receiver production. And across the board, rookies, you know, they backload their points. Where, again, we talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're late-season league winners, which is really, really crucial, whereas veterans kind of break down and fall off as the year goes on. So that's why we want to bet on wide receivers or rookie wide receivers. And if rookie wide receivers don't fully pop off till the end of the year, then to me, JSN starting slow because of this wrist thing, as long as it's not like a huge, huge factor, isn't a big deal to me. Now, when we dive deeper into this like rookie wide receiver stuff, look at these, man. Like this is the reason why we draft rookie wide receivers. Justin Jefferson was the wide receiver 56 in ADP. He was the wide receiver 4 from week 10 on in points per game. Amon-Ra St. Brown was the wide receiver 78 in ADP. He was the wide receiver 5 from weeks 10 on in points per game. Like this is from 2019 to 2020, like 2022. Like you just see monsters down the stretch all the time. Across the board. Even Elijah Moore was the wide receiver 6 in points per game from weeks 10 on after getting drafted as the wide receiver 54 in his rookie year. A.J. Brown, wide receiver 78, and then was the wide receiver 12 from week 10 on. Like, across the board, you see guys crush down the stretch of a season all the time that are drafted outside the top 40 wide receivers in ADP. And that's what I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba, even though he's wide receiver 36 here, likely in the 40s in your home league, though, can provide. Now, why do we want to bet on JSN, right? We've talked a lot about rookie wide receivers, but we haven't really talked about JSN. And it's because he's a very good prospect. He was in year 2. Garrett Wilson was in year 3, and I believe Olave was in year 4 here. And these were the 11 games where all of them played together at Ohio State. JSN had the least amount of targets, but he had 65 catches, 1,019 receiving yards, which was more receiving yards than Chris Olave. He had about the same targets per out run as a Chris Olave, and his yards per out run was the highest of the bunch. He was the most efficient. He was in pretty much a similar role that he's going to be in the Seahawks offense, where instead of Olave and Garrett Wilson, it's going to be Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and then JSN in the slot, just being super, super efficient, going underneath, getting open. Like, he could be an absolute hammer down the stretch. And the thing about JSN is, like, yes, he's going to be the 3rd wide receiver here, but teams run 3 wide receiver sets like 80% of the time. So it's not a huge deal. Like, Christian Kirk is in a spot right now where Zay Jones is running routes over him in 2 wide receiver sets, and he's still a 5th round pick as like a wide receiver 3. So I don't understand the market having Christian Kirk as a 5th round pick and then also being concerned about JSN being the wide receiver 3 right now on his depth chart. Again, they're going to spread things out. They're going to play more 3 wide receiver sets this year on the Seahawks because they have an actual 3rd wide receiver, whereas in years past it's been David Moores and it's been Marquise Goodwin's, this is going to be a legit first-round pick for them that they can now use. So to me, the upside's huge. This was a great passing offense last year. Geno Smith went absolutely crazy. So I do like betting on JSN to be that rookie wide receiver hammer, which then starts, in an avalanche here of a lot of rookie wide receivers that I want to be betting on. Second of which, Jordan Addison. He's going at the 701 as the wide receiver 38 on Underdog. He is my 605 as my wide receiver 32. And he reminds me a lot of Olave, where he's this fantastic route runner and kind of has that day one trump card where he's going to be very clean in and out of his breaks. He's going to beat a lot of those secondary and third option corners that aren't going to be on Justin Jefferson, where, Justin Jefferson is going to take up a lot of resources. Jordan Addison's going to get the leftovers from that. And against man coverage, he was an absolute problem in college. Hayden Winks highlights it here. Above 3 yards per out run versus man coverage every year of his career. 4.4 yards per out run is absolutely insane against man coverage. I want to say Tyreek Hill's yards per out run last year was like 3 or like high 2. So 4.4 is like tough to even wrap my head around. So Justin Jefferson was doubled on 21.1% of his routes last year. Highest in the NFL according to reception perception. Which means that Jordan Addison's going to get the scraps, the leftovers of that. And I think that he's going to make quick work of those guys. And this is an offense where they were top 10 in scoring last year. They were third in pass attempts. They removed Dalvin Cook. They're probably going to be even more pass heavy here. And Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen led the entire NFL in routes run at wide receiver last year. Adam Thielen now gone. It wouldn't shock me at all for Addison to run a ton of routes right out the gate, be a full-time wide receiver. And, from week 7 on, if he was a top 24 guy, it really wouldn't shock me. Now, our sixth name here, Quentin Johnston. We've talked a ton about this guy all offseason. He is Underdog's 801 as their wide receiver 41. He is my 709 as my wide receiver 40. So I will say, I'm right about where Underdog is, but in your home league, if you take Quentin Johnston in the 7th round, you probably could wait until 8th, 9th. He goes much later there. People love to get hung up on Quentin Johnston's body catching problem. It's definitely not great that he body catches, but he was also drafted in the 1st round, literally right next to Addison, JSN, and Zay Flowers. And from a numbers standpoint, he was really good. He led this TCU receiving team every single year in college. He dominated the receiving work at TCU, which was a bad passing offense until his 3rd year. And if we look at his comps in my database, he's an elite wide receiver prospect, which again, 91% of those guys hit top 12 seasons. And these are the guys that most similarly look like him. It's Hopkins, Devontae Adams, these big AJ Green. Now, I will say my tiers are legendary, gold, elite, or legendary elite, gold, silver, bronze. So AJ Green, Sammy Watkins, and Mark Cooper are really high end comps here, but T Higgins and Akeem Nicks and DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams, these are all decent comps for Quentin Johnston, who's a rare bigger body wide receiver in an NFL where that's not really a thing anymore. He's 6'3", 208 pounds, by far the biggest wide receiver in this class, has a ton of upside. He led TCU in receiving 3 years in a row. He was a 21-year-old early declare, which we like. He only big physical wide receiver in this class. He has really good comps. I want to bet on him, especially because he has this really unique upside profile as a guy with a calling card that's not similar, or a trump card that's not similar to Addison, where Addison's a really clean route runner and can beat man coverage. Quentin Johnston, there's a negative correlation between average depth of target and missed tackles forced. And it makes sense, right? Your Chris Olaves go 15-yard downfield and they fall. Your Deebo Samuels of the world, they're going to get the ball in short. They're going to make some guys miss and go crazy, right? Quentin Johnston is an absolute outlier when it comes to this. He is in this far right area where he's going all the way downfield. His average of the target is 14 yards downfield. And then he's electric after the catch, making DBs miss and taking things to the house. That's a really rare skill set. And when you put that in an offense that has, defenses have to worry about Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and then Quentin Johnston, the 4th guy. If he gets open and it's just one-on-one, him versus a DB, he's going to get the ball, make a miss, and take that into the end zone. So that's what's so exciting about him. And on top of that, he was efficient last year, even against press man coverage. He's not the hands are an issue, but he's someone that can beat coverages. He's somebody that is electric after the catch. There's a lot of reasons to want to buy in. And per PFF data, Johnson was an absolute monster against press man coverage with a juicy 33% targets per out run and eye-popping 3.85 yards per run over the last 2 seasons. No player with at least 75 routes against press man was better in the Power 5 than Quentin Johnston. I want to say that was a Dwayne McFarland article I pulled that from. I'll have to double check, but he was insane. He was one of just 6 Power 5 wide receivers that cleared 3+ yards per route run last year. He's very efficient. He crushed it against man coverage. And he's going to give you massive, massive upside and massive spike weeks, where he was this profile in college where, like, look at that game versus Oklahoma State. 3 catches for 114 yards. Like, he can do 7 for 185 and 3 against Oklahoma. Like, he can catch the ball. He can touch the ball 5 times, give you 140 yards and a touchdown, which is what's so exciting. Against Kansas State, he had 4 for 139 yards. Against Michigan, 6 for 163 and 1. Like, we're talking like over 25 yards per catch. He can just have such massive splash plays that he could touch the ball 4 or 5 times and give you like 20 points in a given week. And we're talking about an 8th round, the guy who you can have on your bench to fill in and flex later on in the year. I love having that upside, especially in this offense where he has a career 15.6 career yard ADOT, and Justin Herbert has one of the best arms in the NFL. And we now have Kellen Moore calling plays. Kellen Moore, 4 years in Dallas, 3 years of having a top 6 scoring offense, 3 years of having a top 10 pass attempt offense. Is going to be a high volume, high pass attempt, scoring happy offense that Quentin Johnston is going to be a beneficiary of. Now, he is right now behind Josh Palmer on the depth chart, but again, we talked about rookie wide receivers. They load up points on the back half of the season. We've seen reports of like Olabisi Johnson running routes over Justin Jefferson early on in the season. I'm not all that worried about it because, again, we're drafting him not to start in week 1, but we're drafting him to be playoff hammers and guys that get us into the playoffs because they're so good. So a big, explosive rookie wide receiver attached to Justin Herbert. I will take that and bet on that every single time. Our 7th must-draft breakout wide receiver is going to be Elijah Moore here. He is going off the board at the 806 as the wide receiver 44. He is my 710 as my wide receiver 41. So I'm about, I would say, like about a round higher, a few wide receiver spots higher. And this is where we start getting to the post-type year 3 breakouts part of this video. And Elijah Moore had such an awful year 2. It's important to really step back and understand the kind of trajectory he was after his rookie season, or the trajectory he was on after his rookie season, where he was an elite prospect. He was really good in year 1, where you see here 12.56 points per game on this list. That's pretty much the same as what Garrett Wilson had last year. It's not all that far off. It's not all that far off what Amon-Ra St. Brown had. It's more than what Devonta Smith had and what Drake London had in their first seasons. Elijah Moore was a stud. Now, what this chart is, it's not, like a lot's going on here, but this is my year 2 wide receiver projection model. So it takes into account their prospect profile, their PFF grade, their points per game, their yards per run, their targets, and it spits out what they should score in year 2. Now, of course, he really undershot that 3.45 point per game projection with a brutal 5.5 last year. But you should have some context here where, out the gate, he wasn't terrible. He had 7 targets, 5 targets, 10 targets. Tough to be efficient with Joe Flacco, but he was at least commanding volume. Then Zach Wilson comes in week 4. Then things go south. Then he demands a trade. They don't have him travel week 7 to the Broncos. A bunch of stuff goes wrong, and it just feels similar to Ayuk's weird second year where he gets put in the doghouse, and then year 3 comes out as a top 24 wide receiver. To me, that's what we're sort of in store here with Elijah Moore. I think you kind of just have to throw out the rest of the season. He wasn't playing a full snap share after the first few weeks. It just got really, really ugly. The QB play was awful. But on the bright side, he still scored really well in reception perception, where if we look at what Matt Harmon charted last year, 74th percentile versus man, 78th percentile versus press. He said more success rate versus press coverage of 75.8% success is actually an improvement over his rookie year score. So it's not as if his play truly declined across the board. Simply put, Moore still showed on film throughout his difficult 2022 campaign what a fantastic route runner he is as a pro. He perfectly understands leverage and when to cross a defender's face when working the middle or taking a route outside. He's a comfortable technician who has a strong understanding of timing, deception, and route depth. So he still thinks that Elijah Moore has it. He's a good player. He's a talented player. He was just in a bad spot last year. And now he's going to be in a perfect situation here where he's going to a Cleveland Browns offense that needs a true slot receiver. They were using him in preseason as a receiving back out of the backfield, which is really, really interesting. And it's really exciting because this was a guy who didn't play over 50% of his snaps in the slot until week 7 last year when he demanded that trade, and then it was just too late. But he played 92% of his snaps out of the slot in college. The Jets were using him as a pure X wide receiver for a lot of his time there. I imagine he's going to be going back to his normal slot role on the Browns, and I think that's going to be a really good thing for him. And Matt Harmon sort of highlights what his fit in this offense looks like, and it's all positive. He said they desperately needed more juice in this group, and as reception perception shows, Moore is just the guy to deliver. Moore can operate as the team's vertical slot receiver in 11 personnel, line up as flanker in 2 wide receiver sets, while Cooper takes reps at X. Moore has ample opportunity to shine and command targets. Moore's highlighted success rate against man coverage and the intermediate area of the field is a perfect fit for Deshaun Watson, who thrived pushing the ball down the field in his Houston days. His ability to work underneath as a separator should also provide the Cleveland offense with explosive layup target they didn't have in 2022. The Browns' offense is positioned to be a top-flight passing unit if their quarterback can rebound after playing remarkably poor in his first 6 games last year. So that's why we get excited. He is going to be like pretty much the second or third option in this passing offense. They're going to pass more than they ever had. They passed more than they ever had last year. Kevin Stefanski calling plays, he called more pass plays than he ever had last year. Going into another year, Deshaun Watson should bounce back to his career average efficiency or somewhere near there. And if that happens, the ceiling is the roof for Elijah Moore. He's a guy who can get like the wide receiver 40s. It wouldn't shock me at all if he finishes a top 24 guy. He should be cheaper in your home leagues as well. So Elijah Moore has been a huge target for me. But my highest drafted wide receiver this offseason on Underdog has actually been Rashod Bateman. He is my 806 is my wide receiver 45. He is Underdog's 902 as their wide receiver 47. So I'm about, I would say like 3/4 of a round higher than them, 2 wide receiver spots. But again, that's just because Underdog's actually sharp. In a home league, I'm like way higher than them on Rashod Bateman. And I do understand that Rashod Bateman's coming off an injury, right? He's coming off a Liz Frank. But this is a good breakdown. There was a video of him at practice the other day. And injury analyst Tom Christ here, I believe, or Tom Christ, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that last name, but he said Bateman, Ravens flock looks really good. No deviations in running gait notes. I think that's just, I think your running gait is like, I don't know, like your the way that your legs open and close, I guess. Quick, powerful, changing direction well at present. Looks just fine. Interested to see how he holds up over the course of the season, particularly since we know how he dealt with lingering inflammation. Sometimes that comes back with overuse. Hard to gauge. ETN played really well after the same injury. It can be done. At the present ADP of wide receiver 52, he is well worth the price. So he's in on him as a guy you can take late. He should be good to go. I love betting on his year 3 upside. He showed a ton of promise last year on a per-out basis. He was 12th in yards per out run. He was 18th in targets per out run. His yards per out run was 2.38, which is really, really good. Targets per out run, 23.3%, just fine. Both pretty much elite marks for year 2 guys. And outside of Mark Andrews, he has the most continuity with Lamar Jackson, where he's been here the previous 3 years. Zay Flowers is new. Odell Beckham is new. And Rashod Bateman is, to me, the best value in this passing offense. And we want pieces of this passing offense this year because Todd Monken is going to really revamp this passing offense, where Greg Roman was the previous coordinator. He had them doing this run-heavy, slow-paced offense where Todd Monken's going to come in here, turn up the pass attempts, turn up the pace. They're going to have a ton of plays, a ton of yards. They're going to be more pass-happy than they've ever been, and that's really exciting. And I think Rashod Bateman could be the biggest beneficiary of that this season. Now, our last guy is like a little low-key year 3 breakout. Someone that we've been drafting in the double-digit rounds here, but Nico Collins, man. Nico Collins, he is my 1003 as my wide receiver 55, or wide receiver 51. He's Underdog's 10-12 as their wide receiver 54. So I'm about like 3/4 of a round higher, a few wide receiver spots. And he's actually like, I think he might be like my 6th or 7th highest drafted wide receiver this year on Underdog. He is this fun, like, big body wide receiver. Again, like, I am a sucker for these big body wide receivers, but they're so rare these days. And Nico Collins is 6'4", 215 pounds, 4.4 speed. People forget, man, Devontae Parker was a dog early on in his career. He was a great prospect coming out. Like, this, Devontae Parker being a physical comp, right, a size speed comp, is really good for a player. Now, Nico Collins had an awful first year, where if we look at his peripherals, this is a tweet I had a while back. Nico Collins, he was the wide receiver 76 in points per game. He was 83rd in yards per out run, 80th in targets per out run, 74th in contested catch percentage. And then he took a huge step forward in year 2. Now, despite, he was still the wide receiver 49, so he wasn't startable. But yards per out run went from 83rd to 37th. Targets per out run went from 80th to 21st. Contested catch percentage went from 74th to 2nd. And over that entire span in his rookie year, or actually over this entire span, both of these years, Houston has had the worst quarterback play in the entire league. Now they get C.J. Stroud, who, yes, is a rookie quarterback, but you're going to get a more modern offense here, where C.J. Stroud is one of the most accurate downfield passers we've seen from a rookie prospect profile. He's a very clean passer, a very good passer. I think he's one of the higher floor quarterback prospects we've seen here. And Nico Collins is going to be the number 1 big physical X wide receiver on this team. And so far in preseason, he's been absolutely crushing it. According to Dwayne McFarland, he had a 30% target share, 91% route participation. He was running as like pretty much the wide receiver 1 in preseason. He's their only like big physical X wide receiver. They brought in a new offensive coordinator as well, and Bobby Slowick, who comes from like the Shanahan tree. There's a lot of reasons to be excited here, and I think that he could see one of these mini year 3 breakouts where I'm trying to think of some guys like, not like Michael Gallup, but, one of those guys that comes out of nowhere and just gives you like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 season. I think Nico Collins can be that for you in 2023. Now, again, that's going to do it for us today. I don't know why I said again, like I said that earlier, but that's going to do it for us today. As always, make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. These guys have been drafting all off season long. Their prices are honestly only going up here, but promo code Ron gets you a deposit match up to $100. You can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description down below, the comment section down below, all of that good stuff. Click the link, it'll take you to Underdog Fantasy. You'll use promo code Ron. It'll get your first deposit match up to $100, and you can draft these players and get ready for your home leagues on Underdog Fantasy. But if you're not interested and you can't support there, likes, subscribes, comments, do us a ton of good this time of year. So with that being said, I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm